Woodlawn by Todd Gerelds with Mark Schlabach. Chapter 3. The Coach. While Tandy Gerelds was still a student at Woodlawn High, he injured his right shoulder at football practice. Since he was also on the baseball team, he taught himself to throw left-handed until his injured shoulder healed. He would catch balls in the outfield with a glove on his left hand, then he'd remove the glove, throw the ball left-handed. Undersized compared to most of his classmates, Gerelds knew he had to become a scrappy player and overachiever to succeed. From an early age, Gerelds never wanted anyone to outwork him. He carried the same mindset into coaching, often telling his players, there are going to be times when the people you are competing against are more physically gifted than you are. You can't control that, but what you can control is your own preparation. If you outwork them, sometimes it doesn't matter if they're more talented. Through hard work, discipline, and execution, you can and will beat superior talent. Don't let the thing you have control over be the thing that beats you. Always outwork your competition. Thomas Tandy Gerelds grew up on the east side of Birmingham. He was a multi-sport athlete and was part of the winning teams from an early age. His Little League baseball team at Wahama Park were always competing at the high level. His American Legion Pony League team played in national tournaments. Gerelds played football and baseball at Woodlawn High School and was talented enough to get letter multiple years in both sports. During Gerelds' freshman season in 1956, the Colonels went 10-0 in football under Coach Kenny Morgan. That season, Woodlawn shut out 7 opponents and outscored its competition 219-26 in 10 games. The Colonels slipped to 5-4 in Gerelds' sophomore season and then went 7-2 and 1 tie when he was a junior. During his senior season in 1959, the Colonels finished 5-5 under first-year coach Johnny Howell. Gerelds wasn't the most physically gifted athlete, and he certainly wasn't the biggest player on the football field or baseball diamond. Gerelds was strong and quick, but he was only 5'8". It didn't take his coaches long to figure out they would have a difficult time finding anyone who was more competitive. Gerelds could rarely really hit a baseball, and he was tough and wasn't afraid to make a tackle in football. Gerelds didn't have a very strong arm, and his all-around baseball skills were good enough to draw attention of scouts from Major League. Gerelds did have a very strong arm, and his all-around baseball skills were good enough to draw the attention of scouts from Major League Baseball teams, including the New York Yankees. His dreams of playing in the major leagues came to an end, however, after he was hurt during spring football practice in 1958. While playing running back, Gerelds attempted to score a touchdown by diving over the top. Someone clipped his feet, sending him head first onto the ground. Gerelds extended his arm to break the fall and badly injured his shoulder. Even though his shoulder got stronger, he ultimately needed surgery to repair it, and his arm was never the same. Even with the injured throwing arm, Gerelds was able to finish his baseball career at Woodlawn High. In 1960, he enrolled at Auburn University. He worked bussing tables in the athletic dorm cafeteria and joined the baseball team as a non-scholarship player. As a sophomore in 1962, Gerelds hit .222 in 9 at-bats for the Tigers. The next season, after new coach Paul Nix awarded Gerelds a scholarship, he hit .270 with 6 RBIs, helping Auburn finish 17-8 and win the Southeastern Conference Championship. The Tigers played in an NCAA District 3 tournament in Gastonia, North Carolina, losing to West Virginia 2-1 and Florida State 4-3. As a senior in 1964, Gerelds was one of Auburn's best players, hitting .303 with one home run and 23 RBIs. But Gerelds' hitting record wasn't the most significant event in his life in 1964. That year, he met Auburn freshman Debbie Johnson, who would soon become his wife. Debbie first noticed Tandy when she was a 14-year-old freshman at Woodlawn High. She was the youngest girl in her class because she'd skipped a grade in grammar school. She was a cheerleader and was spunky, outgoing, and strong-willed. Her best friends were Tandy's sister Marcia and his cousin Patsy Emerson. During a sleepover for the Sigma Tau sorority at the Gerelds' house, Debbie noticed Marcia's older brother, who was a senior at Woodlawn. At Debbie's request, Marcia asked Tandy if he had any romantic interest in her friend. "That little Johnson girl," Tandy said. "She's just a kid." That was it. And I never said a word about it for the next 4 years, Debbie said. 5 years later, Tandy noticed Debbie on the Auburn campus during her freshman year in 1964. Debbie was dating another boy at the time, but when Patsy told her that Tandy had asked about that little Johnson girl, she agreed to let him have her telephone number. Tandy called her for a few days later and asked her out. Debbie was supposed to be going to a concert on campus with her current boyfriend. She canceled. She told the boy she couldn't leave her dorm hall because she was being punished for participating in the water balloon fight, and went out with Tandy instead. They skipped the concert out of fear that Debbie's boyfriend might be there, and instead went to a local ice cream drive-up that was something of an Auburn institution. The place was nicknamed The Flush because of its unfortunate actual name, Santa Freeze. It was a popular hangout for students who needed a break from their studies. Debbie had a good time with Tandy, and then she broke the news to her current boyfriend a few days later. She'd met a man she was going to marry. Over the next few weeks, Tandy and Debbie spent as much time together as they could, and then headed back to Birmingham for Christmas break. It was one of those things where you just knew it when it was the person. But I didn't know how he felt, Debbie said, so I had to play it cool. Once back home, Tandy and Debbie visited with older friends, many of whom were already married. Tandy took a temporary job to make extra Christmas money, and Debbie spent a lot of time with her grandparents. Tandy had a habit of always acting immediately on what he believed, right then, in that moment. It could be a great thing, but it could also give way to seemingly rash decisions. This time, Tandy believed Debbie was the girl who was supposed to be with him forever. During one of their dates over the holidays, Tandy asked her, "Hey, I don't have to work on Christmas Eve. You want to get married?" "Yes, I do," she said. "I knew the first time I kissed him that he was the one for me," Debbie said. "I felt it in my heart." More than anything, Debbie wanted a normal family life. She'd grown up in a dysfunctional home. Her father was an alcoholic and was abusive to her mother, who abused painkillers. Police were called to Debbie's home a lot, but her mother refused to throw her father out. On many nights, Debbie lay in her bed awake, praying that her father wouldn't come home drunk. When Debbie's father was sober, she enjoyed being around him. They listened to baseball games and horse races together on the radio, but most of the time she stayed in her room to avoid him when he was drinking. "I thought if I was really smart, my daddy would quit drinking," Debbie said. "I thought if I made the cheerleading squad, my daddy would quit. I thought if I was elected student council, he'd quit. But no matter what I did, he couldn't quit drinking." Debbie's parents were married for 15 years until her mother finally had had enough. She filed for divorce and moved to California. Debbie's grandparents bought her parents' home, and Debbie decided to live with her grandparents so she could stay at Woodlawn High School. Her best friend, Diana Massey, lived across the street, and the Massey's home had often been a refuge for Debbie when her father was drunk or her parents were fighting. Debbie's aunt and uncle lived down the street. Debbie's grandfather, Otis Hammett, was a coal miner, and her grandmother, Ruby, was a homemaker. Her grandparents were strict and old-fashioned, but they loved her dearly and provided with her a stable home. Debbie attended church with them at 66th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, where she invited the Lord into her heart when she was 12 years old. She still remembered the church hymn, "Holy, Holy, Holy," playing as she accepted the invitation to become a Christian and walked to the altar with her heart pounding. On Christmas Eve, 1964, Tandy and Debbie drove across the state line to Trenton, Georgia, where they were married in a courthouse. Their friends Judy and Dan Hunt with them and served as witnesses. Tandy wore a green corduroy suit. Debbie wore a white wool outfit and a tiny hat with a veil. When Tandy told his parents that he was getting hitched, his mother gave him a package of new underwear. Once Tandy and Debbie arrived in the courthouse, they filled out the required paperwork and were sent to the lab for blood tests. Tandy noticed that most of the women in the lab were expecting. He said loud enough for everyone else to hear, "She's not pregnant! She's not pregnant!" When it was their turn to exchange vows, the judge joked with Debbie, "Did you have to hunt long to find him?" Implying that she was out of Tandy's league and could have done better. Tandy was 22, Debbie was 18. A few weeks later, they realized they could have been married in Alabama, where the state age requirement was 18. In hindsight, Debbie remembered it was more exciting to go across the state line to get married. After returning to Birmingham, Tandy called his mother and told her he was officially married. His mother told him that they had allowed his younger sister to open Christmas presents without him there. Then she asked if he and Debbie wanted to come over and play board games with them. Tandy and his new wife were spending their wedding night at the Birmingham Motel on Highway 278, so he told his mother they'd see him Christmas morning. After the holidays, the couple returned to Auburn, where Tandy finished his bachelor's degree in education. When it was time to start searching for a job, Tandy initially thought he might go into sporting goods sales, but then he settled on teaching and coaching. As luck would have it, Woodlawn High School had an opening for an assistant football coach and science teacher. He applied for the job, aced the interview, and was offered the position. After Tandy graduated from Auburn in May of 1965, he and Debbie returned to Birmingham and he went to work at his alma mater. Tandy knew he'd receive a big break. He was starting his coaching career at one of the top high school programs in Alabama, and he would be working for John Lee Armstrong, an up-and-coming coach. Armstrong, who'd played baseball and football at Howard College in Birmingham, was about to begin his first season as head coach. Tandy set out to become the best coach he could be by learning as much as he could from Armstrong, and he and Debbie settled into married life. At times, it was a little bit awkward for her because the seniors on Tandy's football team were only 2 years younger than she was. Many of them were her close friends when she was still attending Woodlawn. "Do you want us to call you Debbie or Mrs. Gerelds?" the players asked. "I don't know," she told them. "Let me ask Tandy." Led by halfback Larry Helms, the Colonels started in 1965 season with a 3-0-1 tie record and were ranked as high as number 8 in the class in state Class 4A. But then the Colonels lost 4 of their last 5 games, including a disappointing 20-14 defeat against rival Banks High School at Legion Field. After Armstrong's first season at Woodlawn High, he surprisingly left to become head coach at Howard College, which by then had changed its name to Samford University. Tandy worried that Woodlawn's new coach wouldn't keep him as an assistant. Debbie was expecting their first child, and he didn't want to be looking for a job. Woodlawn High officially hired Bill Burgess, the assistant coach of their rivals, Banks High, to replace Armstrong, and Burgess agreed to keep Tandy on his staff. Burgess was a Birmingham native. He had attended Jones Valley High School and played fullback and linebacker at Auburn. Tandy was grateful that Burgess kept him on his staff. Debbie gave birth to Jessica Tandy Gerelds on May 17, 1966. Their son, Todd, was born 2 years later, and then daughter Jill in 1972. Coach Burgess and his wife, Gaynell, taught Tandy and Debbie about the importance of family. In the coaching profession, Burgess told them, Your loved ones might be your only supporters when things aren't going well. Tandy liked to joke that most people don't have critics watching their work from the bleacher seats every week. He knew that his coaching decisions and the product he put on the field were going to be scrutinized, and that he would ultimately be judged in the game's outcomes. Burgess created a true family atmosphere among the coaches, their wives, and children. Families attended practices and games together. In fact, coaches' wives and players' parents volunteered to pick up Debbie and her kids during the first few seasons because she still hadn't learned to drive. The coaches' families spent time together after games to eat, laugh, and enjoy one another. With the coaches spending so much time at school, the wives ran the houses. They bathed and dressed the kids, loaded them in the cars, and then drove them to the stadium to watch games. The routine was the same every week, and it wasn't always easy. The wives of children sat in the bleachers and listened to people who didn't know anything about football criticize their husbands and their fathers. The families were there for each other to help one another manage the craziness. Debbie and Tandy would learn that the friendships forged through such times of stress, fun, frustration, and growth were the kinds that lasted forever. Football season meant long hours of work and stress at school for their husbands. With their husbands spending so much time at school and on the practice field, the wives bonded together to support each other. Burgess's tenure had a rocky start as the Colonels went 3-6 in 1966 and 1-7, one tie in 1967, with their lone victory to his second season coming against Phillips High School 14-12 at Legion Field. The next season, Woodlawn performed a little bit better, finishing 3-6. Even though the first few seasons were frustrating under Coach Burgess, the Colonels were well positioned to have a competitive team in 1969. In his first season, Gerelds would have to replace his nucleus. Oh, I missed a page. Colonel halfback David Langner. Is that right? Sorry. Colonel halfback David Langner and his brother Scott were both going to be seniors, along with Greg Gant, who was one of the best kickers and punters in the state. The Colonels won their first 8 games in 1969, scoring 40 points or more in 5 contests. After beating Inslee High 17-7 at Legion Field on November 7th, Woodlawn was undefeated and ranked number 5 in Class 4A going into its regular season finale against rival Banks High. The Colonels defeated the Jets 28-20 at Legion Field and finished the regular season with a perfect 10-0 record. They played Lee High School at Montgomery in the first round of the state playoffs, falling 28-13 at the Crampton Bowl. It was a disappointing finish, but there was little doubt the Colonels had finally turned the corner after a string of mediocre seasons. After the Colonels finished 4-6 in 1970, Coach Burgess resigned to become head coach of Oxford High School in Oxford, Alabama. Over the next 14 seasons, the Yellow Jackets went 106-42-1 and reached the playoffs 8 times. In 1985, Burgess was named as the head coach at Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama, which competed at the NCAA Division II level. In 1992, he led the Gamecocks to a Division II national championship. He and Gerelds remained close friends over the years. After 6 seasons as an assistant coach at Woodlawn High, Gerelds was elevated to head coach before the 1971 season. He had proven to be more than a capable leader while coaching Woodlawn's B team. He guided the Colonels to 3 city B team championships and a 4-year record of 26-4-1. He also coached the school's baseball team. One of the pitchers was Doyle Alexander, who went on to win 194 games in 19 seasons in the major leagues and worked with all other sports except track. City schools leaders overwhelmingly endorsed his hiring. We are extremely pleased to have a fine as a coach as Gerelds, already on the Woodlawn staff and in a position to take over as the head coaching duties. City School Athletic Director Bill Harris told the Birmingham News, "Coach Gerelds is a fine young man, fine young coach. He's a very hard worker, and head coaching job is what he's been working for. He is well liked by the athletes at Woodlawn and by the people of the Woodlawn community, and we know he will do an outstanding job." Burgess also endorsed the promotion of his former assistant and good friend, I hated to leave Woodlawn, Burgess told the News, but I'm happy that it provided an opportunity for Tandy to move up. We have worked closely together here, and I can't think of a better person to fill the position. Much of any success we might have had at Woodlawn can be directly attributed to the work of Coach Gerelds and the other assistants here. I have all the confidence in the world in Tandy's ability, and I feel very strongly that he will give Woodlawn an athletic program that the school and the community can be proud of. One of Gerelds' first decisions as head coach was hiring Jimmy Williams as assistant football coach and track coach at Phillips High School. Assistant Jerry Stearns and Jim Price would soon join his staff as well. We have some good kids here at Woodlawn, and I hope we can continue to give Woodlawn students and fans the type of program they have become accustomed to during Coach Burgess' time here, Gerelds told the Birmingham News. We hope to continue the program Coach Burgess has built, and anything we do here will be due to the great extent of groundwork Coach Burgess did when Woodlawn football was at its low point. In his first season, Gerelds would have replaced the nucleus of his team's high-powered offense. The Colonels had to replace 4 seniors who had left to play for the Southeastern Conference schools: fullback Rick Harbuck at Auburn, quarterback Bobby Parks at Mississippi State, end Rick Meadows at Alabama, and end Gordon Robbins at Georgia. With much of his firepower gone, Gerelds knew he would have to change the way the Colonels were going to play in offense. Instead of being a pass-happy team, Woodlawn would have to beat opponents with a toughness and strong running game. We're going to have to run the football, Gerelds told the Birmingham News shortly before the 1971 season. We can't expect to start out with a passing game we ended up with last year because it was a mighty fine one. We really don't know what we'll have right now, but we've got some good kids, and it's really up to them. They've got a hard job ahead of them, but if it can be done, they're the type of kids who can do it. Certainly, we'll be trying to improve the 4-6 record of last year. On paper, we're not as good, but I believe our attitudes will be much better. Gerelds, who wasn't sure about what to expect from his defense, even with top tackler Bubba Holland and Kirk Price coming back. Jerry Stearns joined his staff shortly after graduating from Livingston State College in Livingston, Alabama. Stearns didn't have any coaching experience, but he was recommended by one of Gerelds' closest friends. Shortly after hiring him, Gerelds brought Stearns into his office and put him in front of the chalkboard. I'm going to draw an offense on the board, and I want you to draw up a 50 defense and any adjustments you would make, Gerelds said. Stearns looked at Gerelds like he was speaking French, not knowing that a 50 defense was an alignment with 5 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers behind them. When I graduated from school, I thought I knew a lot about football, Stearns said. I couldn't even draw up a 50 defense. I heard of it, but I didn't know anything more than who I was supposed to block when I was playing in college. I didn't know anything about where the secondary was or where the linebackers were supposed to go. It really embarrassed me that I couldn't even draw up a 50 defense. While other coaches might have fired Stearns on the spot, Gerelds encouraged him and told him they'd learn together. From that point forward, I was bound and determined it would never happen again, Stearns said. I read every book I could get my hands on, talked to a lot of people, and watched a lot of football. Eventually, Gerelds trusted Stearns enough to turn his entire defense over to him. Gerelds' coaching philosophy was simple. Limit the game plan so that the players could run a select number of plays to perfection. On offense, the Colonels ran a wing T offense, which was very popular at the time. Eventually, they would switch to an I formation, which was similar to the offense the University of Southern California was running. Every play and situation that you have in the wing T offense is directly related to the belly series on the weak side of the buck series on the strong side, Gerald wrote before his death. He went on to say, before you can venture out of these two series, you have to know that every player who will ever play has a good, almost perfect understanding of these two basic plays. The third string guard has to know these two basic plays as well as the first string guard. You have to know that when everything else is uncertain, these two plays can be run effectively by everyone. You have to always plan everything you do as if the starters are all hurt and you have to rely on their subs. If you do this, when a few get hurt, you will not digress. Players do not always have to be great athletes, and they won't be, but they have to know what to do all the time. Gerelds also wanted his team to be the one most well-conditioned squad on the state. It didn't make him the most popular coach among his players, but it enabled his team to fight through fatigue in the fourth quarter when the outcome of many games would still be in doubt. Consistency and endurance are the key to a great program, Gerelds wrote. He continued, any team can have spurts of greatness. Any team can make a run or build some momentum. Only great teams maintain momentum for a long period of time. To get consistency, most important facets of the program have to be repeated until it's second nature to the team. It has to be something that they do, like walking, talking. It can't be something they doubt they can do. It is something they know they can do. Endurance is achieved by working hard when you're tired. It is developed gradually over a period of time. Gerelds wanted his team to be rough and tough, but he wasn't going to become a raging madman to make it happen. It wasn't his personality. During a moment of self-reflection, Gerelds promised himself he would be a positive coach, a mentor, and a leader who would make a lasting impact on his players. You have to have an order of everything you do if it's going to work, Gerelds wrote. He went on to say, everyone has to follow the same rules and regulations. Everyone has to feel like they are part of the program. Every player has to have status. It is better to have an identity that is low than to have no identity at all. It is better to say little and do more than to say a lot and do little. You cannot fool kids. They know when you are fair. You have to tell the kids the truth and be fair. Everything that you make kids do is important. It can affect their lives. Do a few things excellent, not a lot of things good. God puts everyone on earth with a winning spirit. Kids don't start out losers. Parents and environments dictate the track a young person takes. Everyone would like to feel special and needed. Team sports give a group of young people the feeling of being special that they ordinarily wouldn't have. From the very beginning of his career, Gerelds showed a lot of promise as a head coach. The Colonels beat Western Olin High School 40-20 in his head coaching debut on September 10, 1971. Then they posted a back-to-back 21-0 shutouts of Vestavia Hills and Ramsey. Just like that, the Colonels were 3-0 and ranked number 7 in the state Class 4A. It couldn't be this easy, could it? With tailback Lloyd Alford and Rick Pike running the ball and quarterback David O'Hare directing the wing T offense, the Colonels looked like a well-oiled machine to start the season. But then the wheels started coming off. Woodlawn lost 5 of its next 6 games, scoring 7 points in less than 4 of the contests. In a 27-0 loss at Phillips High School, the Colonels ran for only 49 yards and passed for only 41 out of 4 completions. Woodlawn blew a 17-7 lead they had in the second half of a 28-17 loss to Inslee. No matter what Gerelds did, he couldn't get his offense turned around. Despite how hard he tried, he couldn't find an answer. Somehow, the Colonels ended up the season with a 21-18 victory over Banks, which helped erase a lot of the disappointment during Gerelds' first season. He led Woodlawn High to a victory over its biggest rival, which carried a lot of weight with the school's administration, alumni, and community leaders. The Jets nearly came from behind to win after freshman quarterback Jeff Rutledge returned from an injured throwing shoulder to lead 2 scoring drives in the second half. Rutledge's gusty performance would be an omen of things to come in their rivalry. After finishing his season with a 5-5 record, Gerelds was determined to become a better head coach. So much so that his competitive drive and will to win consumed him over the next couple of seasons. He later admitted to being overconsumed with winning in a testimony that he wrote shortly before his death. My decisions now affected many people. For the first time in my life, I felt stress and pressure. The need for success and the drive to be the very best completely engulfed my personality and changed my way of living, both personally and professionally. Professionally, I cared as much about success as I did the young men I was coaching. I became obsessed with the competition and winning. Nothing else seemed to fulfill my want or ego. I considered a defeat a personal flaw in my armor. I decided I wanted to be the very best coach, and I would push myself, assistant coaches, and players until I reached my goal. At the same time, I was teaching science. Unfortunately, I was not interested in science or, for that matter, the students. However, I did an adequate job of teaching for fear that my principal and fellow workers would think I was not doing my job. I worked about 16 hours a day. Coaching became an obsession with me. My success came slow but steady, but not near enough to satisfy my inward drive for personal success. I involved myself so deeply in my job that I had a very little time for my family or friends. I know now that I was never going to fill the void in my life. I thought it would be filled by winning football games. I did become a good football coach. I learned my lesson from better coaches than myself, who usually beat my team. I learned to be sound at what you do and to have order of football, or anything else for that matter. I wanted to be well organized and became upset if anything or anyone got out of order. During the next 3 seasons, Gerelds would learn that he wasn't really in control of anything. It would take the influence of a reluctant superstar and 2 strangers to make him realize that.